I never expected my sister's promotion party to become the stage for my public humiliation. As champagne glasses clinked and guests applauded, I stood in the shadows, just another forgotten figure in my family's perfect portrait. Then Victoria took the mic, her smile sharp as a blade. "Someone had to play the failure," she declared, and the room erupted in cruel laughter. My chest tightened, shame burning hotter than the spotlight. I thought I might collapse. But before I could flee, her boss rose, his voice slicing through the noise, promising a revelation that would silence us all. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, golden light spilling over velvet drapes and polished marble floors. Everywhere I looked, someone was raising a glass to my sister. Victoria stood at the center of it all in her crimson gown, her posture regal, her smile rehearsed to perfection. Cameras flashed, laughter echoed, and my parents hovered near her like devoted satellites, repeating the same words to anyone who would listen. "Victoria is the pride of our family. We always knew she'd make it to the top." I lingered at the edge of the crowd, the hem of my simple navy dress brushing against my ankles. I had chosen it deliberately, elegant but unremarkable, something that wouldn't draw attention. Still, I could feel the weight of eyes on me, not admiring but curious. To most of these people, I wasn't Olivia Carter, a woman with her own story. I was simply Victoria's sister, the one who had stepped away from a promising career, the one who hadn't made it. Or, as I scanned the room, my gaze locked unexpectedly with that of a stranger near the back. He wasn't clapping, he wasn't smiling. Instead, he studied me with a look that made my pulse quicken. Part curiosity, part recognition, as if he knew something no one else did. I blinked and looked away, unsettled. A tiny ripple of unease ran through me. Who was he? Why did he look at me like that? I tried to shake it off, focusing instead on the sparkling champagne flute in my hand. The bubbles rose and burst softly, like fragile promises that never reached the surface. The MC announced Victoria's promotion once more, and a roar of applause filled the room. My parents' faces shone with pride, their hands clasped together as if they were watching their greatest dream realized. "Our Victoria," my mother whispered to a woman beside her, "always destined for greatness." She didn't lower her voice enough for me to miss it. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. It wasn't the first time I'd been overshadowed, but something about tonight, the sheer spectacle of it all, made the ache deeper. Then Victoria stepped forward, microphone in hand, her gown glittering beneath the lights. She paused, waiting for the applause to quiet, basking in every second of admiration. "Thank you," she began, her voice warm and smooth. "I wouldn't be here without my incredible team, my supportive parents, and—" She let her gaze sweep dramatically across the crowd before settling on me. Her lips curled into a smile too sharp to be kind. "And of course, my dear sister Olivia, who has always been willing to stay in the background so others could shine." The room erupted in laughter, not cruel from everyone, but amused enough to sting. A ripple of chuckles traveled like a wave, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. My mother clapped her hands lightly, smiling as if it were the funniest joke she'd heard all night. My father leaned toward me, his voice low but dismissive. "Don't take it so seriously, sweetheart. She's only teasing." Only teasing. How many times had I heard those words growing up? Every snide remark, every jab about how I wasn't as smart, as polished, as successful as Victoria, was brushed aside as joking. And every time I forced myself to laugh along, to swallow the sting and pretend it didn't matter. So I smiled again now, lips trembling as I lifted my glass in a mock toast to my sister. The crowd's laughter faded into polite clapping, and the focus shifted back to Victoria. She continued her speech, weaving words of ambition and triumph, painting herself as the perfect heroine of her own story. But inside me, something twisted. I felt the same old ache, the same gnawing loneliness. Yet tonight it burned differently. Maybe it was the stranger's gaze still lingering from the corner. Maybe it was the weight of years of silence pressing against my ribs. Or maybe it was the sudden, terrifying thought that if I didn't speak up, I would vanish completely, not just from the room, but from myself. I pressed my glass against my lips, hiding the faint tremor of my jaw. My smile was still there, but it no longer belonged to me. It was a mask, fragile and cracking, held together by sheer will. My sister's words still echoed in my ears, willing to stay in the background so others could shine. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would feel like to tear that mask away, to stop being the supporting character in someone else's golden story. The thought was fleeting, quickly smothered by years of conditioning, but it was there, a spark buried in the ashes. I lowered the glass, the taste of champagne bitter on my tongue, and forced my eyes back to Victoria. She was still basking, still glowing, still every bit the golden child my parents had molded her to be. Yet, beneath her flawless performance, I thought I saw a flicker of something brittle, something desperate. The stranger near the back shifted, his gaze never leaving me. A question formed at the back of my mind, one that made my heart race faster. What did he know? The laughter in the room swelled again as Victoria delivered another joke at my expense, and my parents laughed along, perfectly complicit. My smile held, but the spark inside me flickered once more. This time, it didn't go out. I thought the worst of the humiliation was over, but I was wrong. The moment Victoria lowered the mic, she lifted her phone. The screen glowed in her perfectly manicured hands, and with a single swipe, she went live. "To everyone watching," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "thank you for celebrating my big day with me." The camera panned across the glittering ballroom, capturing the applause, the clinking glasses, the lavish decorations, and then, deliberately, it lingered on me. The lens caught me mid-sip, frozen like prey under a spotlight. I tried to step back, but Victoria's hand moved again, framing me perfectly in her shot. "And of course," she added, her smile widening, "I couldn't have done it without my family's support, especially my sister Olivia. She's always been there to cheer me on, even if she prefers to stay out of the spotlight." Laughter rippled again, this time with the added cruelty of thousands watching online. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a cascade of notifications lighting up the screen. Against my better judgment, I peeked. Comments streamed in. "Who's the sad one in the corner? She looks like she lost the lottery of life. Wow, imagine being overshadowed by your sister like that." My throat tightened. I locked the phone and shoved it away, but the words clung to me, heavier than the champagne in my hand. Then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, a voice brushed my ear. "If they knew the truth," a man muttered behind me, low enough that only I heard, "Victoria's empire would crumble." I turned sharply, but the man had already slipped back into the crowd, blending into the sea of suits and gowns. My heart pounded. Who was he? What truth did he mean? The words echoed louder than the music, louder than the laughter, burrowing into my chest like a secret I wasn't supposed to ignore. Around me, the party continued in full force. Guests clapped as Victoria raised her glass for another toast. My parents laughed with her, their faces glowing with pride, never once looking my way. Every cheer, every flicker of admiration thrown her way felt like a brick stacking higher and higher around me, a wall closing me in. I tried to breathe, but the air was thick, suffocating. The more they cheered, the smaller I felt. By the time Victoria finished her toast, I wasn't just invisible. I was the punchline, the living backdrop for her victory. As the crowd dispersed into smaller circles, I drifted toward the buffet table, desperate for air. That was when I overheard them. Two of Victoria's colleagues, standing just a step too close, their voices just a shade too careless. "Can you believe she got credit for that merger?" one whispered. "She didn't even draft the pitch," the other replied. "Word is, her sister Olivia did. But hey, Victoria's the one with the spotlight." I froze. The words struck like a physical blow. The merger. The very deal my sister was being praised for tonight. The one that had catapulted her into her new promotion. I had worked on it years ago, sketching out the strategies at our parents' kitchen table. She'd taken my notes, my late-night brainstorms, my research, and repackaged them as her own. And now she was celebrated as a visionary. The champagne glass trembled in my hand. My vision blurred, not from alcohol, but from the rush of betrayal flooding back with searing clarity. I couldn't stand there any longer. The music, the laughter, the flickering lights, they pressed in like a storm. My chest heaved as I pushed through the crowd, slipping unnoticed toward the side doors. The cool night air hit me like a wave, crisp and sharp, a relief that almost made me stagger. I stepped onto the balcony, away from the suffocating glow of the chandeliers. The city stretched before me, skyscrapers shimmering against the midnight sky. I gripped the railing, the metal cold beneath my palms, grounding me. For the first time that evening, I let my mask slip. The tears came, hot and unrelenting. I had promised myself I wouldn't cry. Not tonight, not in front of them, but out here, with no one watching. Or so I thought. I let the grief pour out. The betrayal wasn't just about Victoria's words tonight. It was about years of being dismissed, years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, not enough. I thought of my parents, laughing at her cruel jokes, insisting they were harmless. I thought of all the times they told me to be grateful, to be supportive, to stay quiet. And I thought of Victoria, basking in the glow of stolen triumphs, while I stood in the shadows, erased. But beneath the sorrow, something else stirred, a flicker of anger, sharp and alive. For the first time, I let myself admit it. I deserved better. I wiped my cheeks, the city lights blurring through the remnants of tears. Somewhere inside that ballroom, a secret was waiting to be revealed, a truth that could break Victoria's golden image. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it. And when it came to light, it wouldn't just change the way they saw her. It would change the way they saw me. When I returned from the balcony, I hoped the night might pass without further humiliation. But the moment I stepped back into the ballroom, I realized my hope was naive. Victoria stood center stage again, glass of champagne in hand, her crimson gown gleaming under the lights like she was carved out of fire itself. She lifted her glass high, smiling that perfect smile that had always fooled everyone but me. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "I want to thank you once more for celebrating my success tonight, but let's be honest." Her gaze swept the room, pausing long enough to make each guest feel personally addressed. Then, deliberately, her eyes locked on mine. "In every family, someone has to play the failure so the rest of us can be winners. I suppose I should thank my sister Olivia for being so generous in that role." The laughter was instant and explosive. Glasses clinked, voices rose, and people doubled over as though she had delivered the most brilliant punchline of the evening. My parents clapped like eager spectators at a play, grinning as if Victoria's cruelty was harmless comedy. I stood frozen, my ears ringing, the laughter crashing down on me like a tidal wave. My chest constricted until it hurt to breathe. My vision blurred at the edges. I wanted to run, to disappear, to melt into the marble floor beneath me, but my body refused to move. And then, through the cacophony of amusement, I caught sight of him, the CEO of Victoria's company, standing not far from the stage. His expression wasn't one of delight. His lips were pressed into a hard line, his brows furrowed, and his eyes, sharp as a blade, were fixed on Victoria. The laughter still thundered around me, but that look cut through everything. It was a silent verdict, cold and unyielding, and though no one else seemed to notice, I did. It sent a shiver down my spine, a whisper that the night wasn't going to end the way Victoria thought it would, but I didn't feel hope. Not yet. Because at that moment, the humiliation was too raw, too consuming. I stumbled away from the center of the room, desperate for escape. My phone buzzed again and again in my clutch. Reluctantly, I pulled it out. The live stream was still going, but now clips had already been cut, edited, and spread across social media like wildfire. I watched myself on the small screen, my face pale and stricken as Victoria delivered her line. Someone has to play the failure. The clip ended with my frozen reaction, looping endlessly. Comments poured beneath it. Ouch, poor sister. That's brutal. Imagine being humiliated like that in front of everyone. Why does she look so pathetic? This is gold. I felt my knees weaken, the phone trembling in my hand. My humiliation had gone from a private wound to a public spectacle, dissected by strangers for their entertainment. My name, my face, mocked, shared, meme-worthy. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone against my chest as if I could smother the reality pressing in from all sides. But the truth seeped through anyway. This wasn't just a party anymore. It was a stage, and I had been cast as the fool in a play I never agreed to join. I could hear more laughter behind me, another round of applause for Victoria. I knew exactly what it meant. She was still going, still basking, still weaving her victory from my silence. And I had given her that silence for years. Tonight, it was killing me. I slipped out of the main hall and into a quieter corridor, my heels clicking faintly against the floor. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I sat on the polished tile, hidden from the glitter and gold. The sob tore from me before I could stop it. I pressed a hand over my mouth, desperate to stifle the sound, but the tears came anyway, hot and relentless. I thought of that look, the CEO's eyes cutting through the laughter. A fragment of something inside me wanted to cling to it, to believe it meant he saw the truth, but doubt smothered the spark. For every glance of disapproval I imagined, there were hundreds of laughing faces, thousands of online comments already cementing me as the failure. My phone buzzed again. Against my will, I looked. The clip had hit 1 million views. Hashtags were spreading. Star promotion queen for Victoria. Huss family failure for me. I dropped the phone into my lap, the weight of it unbearable. My whole life I had endured being overshadowed. But this was annihilation. I buried my face in my hands, rocking slightly, as if movement alone could comfort me. My breath came shallow, ragged. The corridor blurred with tears. For the first time, I let the thought pierce me fully. Maybe they were right. Maybe I really was nothing. The sound of celebration swelled again from the ballroom, muffled but undeniable. Victoria's voice rang out, triumphant, amplified by the speakers. She was still shining, and I was still breaking. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this was a turning point, the moment I crossed into something I couldn't undo. But right then, all I could feel was the weight of collapse, the bottom dropping out beneath me. I had barely managed to compose myself when the ballroom fell into a strange, sudden hush. I wiped my cheeks, forcing myself upright, and peered back through the open doors. Victoria was still on stage, basking in the glow of her triumph, when the CEO, Mr. Harrison, stepped forward. He moved slowly, deliberately, and when he reached for the microphone, the shift in the room was palpable. Conversations faltered, glasses paused midair, and even Victoria's confident smile flickered. He held the mic with calm authority, his voice carrying like steel wrapped in velvet. "Perhaps tonight," he began, "is the right moment for the truth to finally be spoken." The silence was electric. I froze in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. My sister tilted her head, feigning curiosity, but the stiffness in her posture betrayed her unease. Mr. Harrison's gaze swept the room before resting firmly on me. "Many of you may not know this, but the success we're celebrating tonight, the merger that supposedly defines this promotion, was not the work of one person." He paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air. "It was the work of two, and without one of them, it would have failed catastrophically." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Victoria's painted smile wavered. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said with a light laugh, trying to regain control. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. "Years ago, when this project was floundering, it was Olivia Carter who stepped in behind the scenes. She mapped out strategies, provided research, and essentially salvaged what would have been a multi-million-dollar loss. Without her, the company would not be thriving tonight. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. Heads turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Someone near the front whispered audibly, "Wait, what?" My legs felt weak, as though the floor itself had shifted. I hadn't expected this. Not now. Not here. I had buried that chapter of my life, convinced no one had noticed my quiet contribution. But here it was, dragged into the light by the very man who had witnessed it all. Victoria's face blanched beneath her makeup. "That's not accurate," she stammered. "Olivia wasn't involved." Mr. Harrison raised a hand, silencing her. "I was there. I saw the notes. I spoke with you, Victoria, when you failed to provide a viable plan. And then, magically, within days, a comprehensive strategy appeared, written in a different hand. You passed it off as your own. I allowed it at the time because the company needed stability, and Olivia refused recognition. But tonight, after what I've just witnessed, I cannot allow this lie to continue." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Cameras that had once recorded Victoria's glory now swiveled toward her pale face. My parents stared at me, mouths parted, their laughter from earlier caught in their throats. For once, they had no words. Mr. Harrison's voice softened slightly as he turned toward me again. "Olivia, you may not have wanted the spotlight, but credit where it is due. Without you, we would have lost everything." Applause didn't come. The room was too stunned. The truth settled like a storm cloud, ready to break apart everything my sister had built. Victoria laughed again, brittle this time. "She wasn't even part of the company. She has no credentials to claim this." "On the contrary," Mr. Harrison interrupted smoothly. "Olivia was offered a consultancy role afterward. She declined, citing her health and a need for balance. That was her choice. But you took advantage of it, Victoria. You wore her success like a crown and never admitted where it came from." Another gasp surged through the crowd. My pulse raced, my throat dry, but I couldn't look away. It felt like watching the gilded walls of a palace collapse in slow motion. Every brick of my sister's perfect image cracked under the weight of his words. A man near the stage lifted his phone and started recording, his lens aimed squarely at Victoria's trembling hands. Others followed, capturing every expression, every denial, every fracture of her mask. I realized then that this wasn't just a revelation. It was a reckoning, one unfolding live before an audience too large to ever forget it. My chest tightened with conflicting emotions, relief, fear, even a strange ache of pity for the sister who had always towered over me. But beneath it all burned something fiercer, the sense that, at last, the truth had broken through the silence. I straightened in the doorway, invisible no longer, and for the first time all evening Victoria had no script, no charm, no shield. Only the truth, staring her down with cameras rolling and the world watching. The silence after Mr. Harrison's words lasted only a heartbeat. Then the room exploded, not with applause but with a flurry of whispers, the frantic tapping of phones, the unmistakable hum of breaking news. The live stream that had once showcased Victoria's triumph now shifted its focus, the comments pouring in faster than anyone could read. Did he just say she stole her sister's work? Victoria's no genius, she's a fraud. Justice for Olivia, get this trending now. Within minutes, the tide turned. Guests who had laughed at me earlier now avoided my gaze, shame flickering in their eyes as if they had been caught participating in a crime. Screens lit up everywhere. Phones, tablets, even the big display near the bar now played reshared clips of Harrison's speech. The caption beneath one viral clip read, "Olivia Carter exposed as corporate thief." My phone buzzed relentlessly in my clutch. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Check justice for Olivia. Check to fraud Victoria. Check her family failure no more. I stood rooted to the floor, trembling as the weight of years lifted off my shoulders. I had lived so long in the shadows, silenced, diminished, erased. And now, before the world, the truth was undeniable. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and unstoppable. But they weren't the tears of shame that had broken me earlier in the night. These were different, raw, overwhelming, almost cleansing. I pressed my hand against my chest, gasping softly as sobs shook through me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't crying because no one listened. I was crying because finally I was heard. The applause never came, but I didn't need it. The collective gasp, the furious chatter online, the sheer shift in energy was more powerful than any ovation. For years, my silence had been mistaken for weakness. Tonight, the truth itself roared louder than I ever could. On stage, Victoria's perfect facade cracked. She forced a laugh, her voice pitching higher than usual. "This is ridiculous. My sister is exaggerating. She's always been jealous of me. Everyone knows that." The camera zoomed in. Every word she spoke only deepened the fissures in her story. "Yes, maybe she helped a little, but that doesn't mean I didn't deserve my promotion. I worked hard, harder than anyone." Gasps spread through the room again. Her tone was frantic, defensive, a far cry from the polished elegance she had displayed minutes ago. "Victoria," someone called from the crowd, "are you admitting Olivia did the work?" Her face paled, then flushed crimson. "No, that's not what I—" But the damage was done. The room smelled blood, and the audience, both present and online, wasn't about to let her wriggle free. I watched her unravel, word by word, denial by denial, and for the first time, my parents didn't rush to defend her. My mother's hand clutched the stem of her glass so tightly I thought it might snap. My father's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with something I had never seen directed at Victoria before. Disappointment. They didn't speak. They didn't laugh. They didn't gaslight me into believing it was just a joke. Their silence was louder than any confession. Victoria's voice cracked. "I am not a fraud. This is all being blown out of proportion." But phones were raised, recording every desperate word, every trembling note. She had lived her life believing she was untouchable, but now the armor was gone, stripped by truth and broadcast to the world in real time. I lowered myself into a nearby chair, my hands still trembling, tears streaking down my face. But the sobs had quieted now. A strange peace settled over me, fragile, trembling, but real. I wasn't happy, not exactly. I didn't feel vindictive satisfaction watching my sister fall apart. What I felt was deeper, quieter, relief. Relief that I wasn't invisible anymore. Relief that the truth had finally been spoken, and no one could take it back. The guests shifted uneasily, unsure whether to leave or to stay. The music had stopped, the celebration dissolved into chaos. The ballroom felt colder, emptier, as though the golden glow that once surrounded Victoria had burned away, leaving only ash. I leaned back, letting the exhaustion wash over me. This wasn't triumph, it was survival. And though I sat trembling, broken in places that might never fully heal, I knew I wasn't the one crumbling tonight. Victoria was. Her empire of lies had collapsed in front of everyone, and no amount of charm could rebuild it. I closed my eyes briefly, breathing through the storm inside me. The world was watching, recording, replaying every second. And while they would remember her downfall, I would remember this moment for something else. For the first time, I wasn't the failure. The days after the party moved like aftershocks of an earthquake. Everywhere I looked, something had shifted. Headlines bloomed across news outlets. Rising star or corporate fraud. Victoria Carter's success under scrutiny. Clips from the live stream replayed endlessly online, each view another nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed image. Victoria, the sister who had once seemed untouchable, now avoided the public eye. Her company released a terse statement about internal review. Rumors spread of her suspension, whispers of resignation hovering over her like vultures. She had built her empire on borrowed bricks, and now the foundation had cracked beyond repair. For me, the world looked different. Strangers online, people I had never met, flooded my inbox with messages of support. You deserved better. Justice for Olivia forever. We see you. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a shadow trailing behind my sister. I was Olivia Carter, a person with a voice, a story, a truth that mattered. But the strangest part was this. I didn't feel hungry for revenge. Watching Victoria stumble wasn't sweet. It was hollow. I had carried pain for so long that when it was finally lifted, I didn't want to waste my freedom shackled to hatred. One afternoon, Mr. Harrison called me into his office. His manner was steady, professional, but there was something warmer in his tone than I had ever heard before. "Olivia," he said, folding his hands on the desk, "I know the past few weeks have been overwhelming, but I won't pretend. The company needs people like you. You saw what others couldn't, you solved problems no one else could, and you did it without recognition. That is rare. That is leadership." I sat across from him, unsure how to respond. He leaned forward slightly. "We'd like you to come back, not as a consultant this time, but as a director. A higher position than the one your sister once held. The offer is yours if you want it." The words struck me like a thunderclap. A part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to prove I could stand in the spotlight on my own terms, to show the world that the so-called family failure could rise higher than anyone expected. But another part of me hesitated. I thought of the years I had sacrificed to ambition before, the nights I had drowned in exhaustion, the anxiety that had pulled me under until I had to walk away. I thought of the freedom I had tasted when I stepped aside, when I learned to breathe again. I smiled softly, shaking my head. "I'm honored, truly, but I don't think that path is mine anymore." For the first time in his polished career, I saw Mr. Harrison look surprised. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then, what is your path, Olivia?" The answer came easier than I expected. My own. Weeks later, I signed the lease for a small office space on a quiet street. It wasn't grand, it didn't glitter, but it was mine. I started a consulting firm, not to climb some impossible ladder, not to outshine anyone, but to create something that reflected me. Honest work, done with integrity, done on my terms. The first clients trickled in, startups, small businesses, people who needed guidance without the cutthroat politics of a giant corporation. Helping them felt different. It wasn't about power or prestige. It was about impact. It was about living without the constant need to prove myself. My parents came to visit once, their expressions uneasy as they stepped into the modest office. For years, they had measured success in salaries and titles, in golden children and shining reputations. But here, in this space, they couldn't deny the quiet strength I carried. For the first time, they didn't compare me to Victoria. They simply sat in silence, perhaps realizing too late what their favoritism had cost. Victoria herself never reached out. I sometimes wondered if she hated me, if she thought I had engineered her downfall. But I didn't dwell on it. Her silence was no longer my prison. One evening, as I locked the office door, I glanced at my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't the one who had cowered in a ballroom, humiliated and voiceless. She wasn't the failure. She wasn't the forgotten sister. She was someone new, scarred, yes, but whole. The best revenge wasn't watching Victoria collapse, nor was it taking the job she lost. The best revenge was standing here, free of her shadow, free of the need to compete in a race I never wanted, living my life on my own terms. As I walked into the night, the city buzzing softly around me, I thought of that viral phrase spreading across the internet, the one strangers had adopted as my story's banner. The best revenge isn't destroying them, it's no longer needing them. And for the first time, I truly believed it.